This is insane. So roughly 1 in 3 Americans are no contact with their family, according to a study, a recent study. And if you've never heard of no contact, basically what that means is I'm upset with you and I'm deciding I'm no longer talking to you. I'm completely ignoring you. I'm ignoring you on social media. I have blocked all of your texts, blocked your emails, blocked your calls, complete silence. Okay. And many people are doing this with family, namely with their parents. And if you saw the recent Oprah podcast, first of all, her podcast is called The Trend of Going No Contact with Family. And a lot of people are upset with her using that word trend because, first of all, it sounds dismissive, and people feel like what she's implying is that this whole issue of going no contact is a fad. But personally, I don't think that's what Oprah meant. I think what she was basically doing, first of all, Oprah knows that she has a lot of older people in her audience because she's been on TV since the 1980s. And, a lot of her audience are baby boomers and parents. And so what she might have been trying to do by using that word trend is to sort of imply that this is a fad. So that way people in her audience might think, well, you know what? My kids are no contact with me, but there's hope because once this fad is over, then they're going to be, everything's going to be fine and we're going to be back together, in hopes that they watch her show, right? So that way they can understand what they need to do to be a part of repairing and rekindling their relationship with their adult children, which is what? Having self-reflection. Okay. So I want to say this. So before I delve into talking about Oprah, her podcast, and how well or how not well she was as a journalist on that podcast, I want to really focus on this dichotomy between the siameses of parents, which is this idealized version of themselves as a non-abusive caregiver. Whereas their children, their adult children, their siameses are the persistent rumination of a traumatic childhood. And I'm just going to say this. First off, I know that not every parent is toxic or a narcissist, as well as not every child who goes no contact with their parent is doing it simply because they want to be evil, and they have a real reason based on some type of trauma or some type of conflict, real conflict that they've had with their parents. They have a real true reason for making that choice. But parents and children are mutual change agents. And whatever flaw you have in your personality as a parent, more than likely the person who's going to challenge you before anyone else is going to be your child or your children. Same with children. If you have some type of flaw, parents are going to challenge you to become a better and a more effective communicator. But here's the thing, I was talking about this on my Instagram channel. So if you're from my Instagram channel, you came here to hear about this, I'll explain it now. This whole conversation that's been happening all over the internet, I call it a phenomenon more than a trend because I know trend gets people up in arms. But this whole no contact phenomenon, what it really is revealing to me is how disruptive and how dysfunctional, I should say, authoritarian parenting styles are. Like, there is no reason that after someone grows up and they go no contact with a parent who has had an authoritarian type of parenting style, there's no reason that parents should think that that type of style of parenting is a good thing. So first of all, if you don't know what authoritarian parenting is, basically anyone who employs that type of style of parenting, their number one fear is their child not respecting them and them not having dominance over their child. And so a lot of times you'll hear parents say things like, you know what, when you get your own house, that's when you can have an opinion. That's when you can have emotions. But when you are under my roof, it's my way or the highway, right? And this is going to be a really weird example, but I'm going to give it so it just hopefully sticks in your mind. I want you to imagine that you have a child, right? And that child at age 6 knows that he's going to be an atheist. He's like, I don't believe in Christianity. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't believe that God exists or whatever. And so he knows that he's going to be an atheist. There are a lot of parents out here who, if their child told them something like, hey, I don't think you should be hitting me with the belt because I'm an atheist and I don't believe in that. A lot of parents would tell him, well, guess what? When you're under my roof, I'm going to hit you with the belt because in the Bible, it says, spare the rod, spoil the child. And I'm going to whip your atheist ass tonight. Okay. And so what's going to happen, or what is my point here? My point is, if you are raising a child and it's not in your mind to say to yourself, I am preparing an individual to become an autonomous adult. If that's not on your mind and you're saying this child is going to do what I say, and anything that they do will not cause me to lose my dominance over them, and they will always respect me no matter what I do. If that's what a parent is saying, then when that child grows up and they display the ultimate form of autonomy through something like no contact, that's when you see a lot of parents getting up in arms and saying, oh my God, how can they do this? Because even Oprah said this on her podcast. She said, back in the 80s and 90s, I don't care what a parent did to a child. It was sacrosanct. Like you would never think about ignoring your parents. Your parents could damn near set you on fire in a car. You know what I mean? And she said a lot of her guests would come on there, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they would be like, yeah, my mom did this or my father did that, but it's still my mom. It's still my dad. And so now we have moved out of that. But I want to talk about what is authoritative parenting. So you have authoritarian parenting, which is I want to dominate and, it's my way or the highway. But then you have authoritative parenting. And that is my favorite parenting style. And I hate the fact that it is synonymous with gentle parenting. It means the same thing. But when people use the word gentle or the phrase gentle parenting, they get it confused with permissive parenting, which means you're letting your child run all over you and they can do whatever they want. So I like the term authoritative parenting because what it says is this: you're allowing your child to have emotions, right? So if you tell that child, hey, you're not going to be bullying that little girl, and he gets mad, and you might say something like, you know what, it's okay, you can go in your room and get angry, but you're still not going to be able to play your video game today, and you're going to be on punishment because I want to make sure you understand you can't hit other people and they have boundaries and you're going to respect their boundaries, right? So you have an authoritative parenting style. You're setting rules, but you're allowing your child to feel some form of autonomy. And so that's the difference between authoritative, gentle, unfortunately, authoritative parenting and authoritarian parenting. Now, I want to touch up on another point because there are a lot of parents out here. A couple of them said this on the Oprah's podcast. They think that when their child stops communicating with them through no contact, that means that they are conflict avoidant and they just simply don't know how to communicate. They're listening to these social media influencers talk about no contact, and rather than being able to have an open conversation with their parent, they're just deciding I'm not going to talk to them. And the parent is saying, well, it's because they're conflict avoidant. And that might not be the case at all. Because I'm going to tell you, I'll give you a prime example here. I have someone in my family, I'm not going to say who they are, but this person is one of the worst communicators I have ever come across in my entire life. And we were very close at one point. And I stopped talking to this individual for about 4.5 years. And finally, not too long ago, literally like maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, someone said what everybody says to you when you go no contact. They're like, oh, this is your family. What if something happens to this person and they die and you feel all of this regret? And what if you can help them and you only have one? I'm just going to say it was my cousin. You only have one cousin and you need to talk to this person. And so we had kind of a dialogue on text. And before I could even share why I went no contact or share my perspective of what happened, this person was using things to try to triangulate me. And basically they were using conditional love. And they're saying, if you don't apologize to me, even though they did something really, really mean to me, and they were lying on me and the whole thing, if you don't apologize to me, then you're not going to have me as your ex, your cousin, or whatever. Conditional love. And it just reminded me of the reason why I went no contact in the first damn place. I'm like, I can't have it. So my point is, a lot of parents think that their adult children are conflict avoidant, but really what's happening is, and I'll say one more thing. This person in my family has an explosive temper, and I can't say, hey, you lied on me without them going insane. I'm talking insane. There's something called DARVO that psychologists say that narcissists do, and basically it's an acronym for deny, attack, reverse role of victim and offender. And this person, if I were to say, hey, you lied on me, you flat out lied on me, they would deny, attack, and they would become the victim and I would become the antagonist. And it would just be that simple. And there's no talking around it. So a lot of adult children feel like if I say something to my parent, here comes that authoritarian parenting style. They're so hell-bent on me respecting them and them having power in the relationship dynamics, they don't even want to hear what I'm saying. They can't use emotional empathy, let alone cognitive empathy, to understand their role and how they created this whole situation, or at least they played a part in me going no contact with them and ignoring them. And I touched on something I want to tell you. What is, first of all, emotional empathy? Emotional empathy is the ability to understand someone's perspective from their perspective, meaning you actually are feeling how they feel. And a lot of people can't access their emotional empathy. And here's why a lot of adult children are mad at their parents, because without even realizing it, maybe on a subconscious level, what's happening is they're saying to themselves, even if you can't understand where I'm coming from and feel how I feel, you can still employ cognitive empathy, which means you're using empathy on an intellectual level, right? So you're able to say to yourself, I know right from wrong. And even though I don't feel what he or she is feeling, I know I wouldn't want to go through that. But a lot of parents are still ignoring that, or they're not doing that. And then you have compassionate empathy, which means that not only can you feel what someone is going through from their perspective, but you will actively try to relieve their pain. You'll go out of your way to help them, to keep them from experiencing whatever they're experiencing. So, my point in bringing this up is there is a shift that we're experiencing, and Oprah touched on this as well. There's a shift that we're experiencing, and no longer can parents just say, I'm going to demand respect from you because I am your parent. Now, let's talk about the Oprah show. First of all, Oprah, I'm going to say this about her. A lot of people, I think there's a trend of hating Oprah. On TikTok, I want to say about a year or two ago, people were trying to cancel her over the Color Purple movie because Taraji P. Henson came out and told her story about some things that were going wrong and like she doesn't get paid enough and that kind of thing. Oprah, there was a hurricane, I want to say in Maui, and her and The Rock, or I should say Dwayne Johnson, he used to be called The Rock, the wrestler, they came out and they were asking people for donations. And there was like another thing that happened where she, in one of her properties in Hawaii, she had blocked up the road or something like that. And people were saying, folks could die, you blocked up the road, as well as other things that people started questioning her honesty, basically. And my thing is this, okay, if I look at Oprah over the course of 30 or 40 years since she's been on TV, she's done a lot of great things for people, and at the end of the day, whatever mistakes that she's made, I don't know the whole story. Hopefully she has corrected those mistakes. But my point is with this podcast, I think she did a good job. She was neutral. And I've heard people say that they don't like that she was neutral, but I think it was important for her to remain neutral because it's not about Oprah. It's about parents' experience and about adult children's experience. And even though she was neutral, she did give you some hints about where her stance was. That's how it seemed to me. So she said, this is not the 1980s and the 1990s where people were just going to, say, well, no matter what my parents did, I'm just going to still be in their life and still be in their proximity because it's my father and my mom. She said, it's a time where everyone is evolving now. And one of her guests, I believe it was her first guest, he told Oprah, he said, my parents don't like my wife. When she first came on the scene, they didn't really like her. They were kind of rude to her and dismissive to her. And he said, I have the kind of parents where, they want me to go to like Harvard or Princeton or whatever. So they seemed kind of like they were like elitist parents, according to what he's saying here. And so for whatever reason, I'm assuming maybe she's not a Harvard type of lady or whatever, they weren't feeling her. And when he mentioned that he was going to, that he had proposed to her and that they were going to marry, he found out that the parents were going to some of their friends and trying to delay the marriage. And so he said, you know what, that's it. And he went no contact. And this is what I want people to think about, because we don't know both sides of the story. He could be sitting right there lying and the parents might not have done anything wrong. So I don't know. I don't want to demonize the parents, but I do feel like this. If someone says, I'm going to go no contact with my mother, for example, they're not just saying I'm going to block her phone calls and I'm just going to block. What they're saying is on Thanksgiving just passed a few days ago when I'm recording this video. On Thanksgiving, I'm not going to eat any of her stuffing anymore, none of her good macaroni and cheese, none of her turkey. I'm willing to give all of that up. He has a daughter now, the guy in Oprah's podcast, and now his daughter doesn't have any grandparents. So there is so much that he's losing, even though he's gaining his mental health, and he is enforcing his boundary, but there's a lot to lose. And so that is a huge decision. And when I hear people saying, oh, well, why are you dismissing your mama? She's the one who brought you into this world, and you're just conflict avoidant. You don't know how to have a conversation with her. But at the end of the day, if someone is making that decision, it probably means that they've tried multiple times to have a conversation with their parents, but their parents aren't listening to them. Let's move on to another guest that she had on her show. It was a woman. She was a social media star. I want to say she was on TikTok, and she said that she has two sons. And she said her two sons have no problems with her. And they say, Mom, there's no issue with you. You're one of the best. You're a great mom. I'm sorry. But her daughter went no contact with her. And she is basically like, I don't know why my daughter went no contact with me. But I noticed something when she was talking to Oprah, and she was even posing some questions for the therapists that were on the podcast. She was talking so much that if you notice, if you watch the video, they had to kind of do a transition and flip the screen basically to cut some of the stuff that she was talking about off. And when Oprah was trying to ask her questions, she was kind of talking over everyone. And that makes me wonder, does she have the same type of communication style with her daughter? When her daughter's trying to express herself, is she the type of person that will listen, or is she just going to start talking all over her daughter? Now, obviously, from that show, I can't make that conclusion. I can't come to that conclusion and say she's a bad mother because she was a little long-winded on the show. But it does make me wonder if that's a pattern on her behavior. If it is, it's going to take self-reflection for her to realize that. And if you're trying to communicate with somebody who does not possess the ability to self-reflect, you cannot have a conversation with them. Okay. And then I'm going to move on to one more. There was a Black woman. She stood up in the audience and she said that she has a son who is 30 and he's emotionally and physically abusive to her. He doesn't like her current husband. She said she divorced his father, her son's father. I believe she said when he was 12 or 15, basically he was an adolescent. And she said that the son, if I remember correctly, is also abusive to his real father and his father's either girlfriend or wife. Okay, so in that situation, I do wonder if she's just raising a narcissistic son. He could just be flat out a narcissist or be extremely toxic, because people forget narcissists have childhoods and somebody had to raise them. And we can say, well, why are they a narcissist? Maybe the parent is the problem. Well, at the end of the day, they're a narcissist. And if they're entitled, that's what they are, right? But I did wonder, I'm saying, okay, well, you went no contact with your 30-year-old son, but did you do that because he's really problematic? Or is he problematic because you've been choosing men over your son? I don't know, because there's two sides to every story. But I know in my family, that's happened quite often with the women in my family. They choose their men over their brother, their men over their sons, men over their nephew and all that. And a lot of times boys will notice something in a man's behavior. And you might say, well, what about the fact that he abused his real father? Look, his real father could be just as selfish, if the mother is selfish, just as selfish as the mom. And when two selfish people come together, baby, it's not going to work. If you put two selfish people in a relationship, that is not going to work. It's like trying to put two narcissists together. Maybe it works, but a better combo, quote unquote, is a narcissist and someone who lacks self-love and who lacks boundaries, because they can have the perfect, toxic relationship, okay? Trauma bond, I guess I would say. But so it just made me wonder, is he acting out because she has been disloyal to him and her loyalty is more towards men? Or is she raising a narcissistic son or an entitled son, which could very well be the case. So anyway, I'm going to say this, and I really want you to get in the comments and let me know your opinion, because again, I know on the internet, there's going to be a cacophony of conflicting voices everywhere, online, on social media, because this is a hot button issue. And there are many adult children out here who are terrible to good parents. I mean, parents who not only provided for them financially, but who did not neglect them. And they're still ignoring their parents. And they think they're going no contact, but really what they're doing is giving their parents the silent treatment because maybe they're narcissistic. And there are a lot of parents out here who thought that they were raising their kids correctly, or they want their kids to think that they thought that they were raising their kids correctly. And they ain't doing nothing but gaslighting them. And they deserve for that child to go no contact with them. I'm going to say this, and sort of slightly more in favor of parents. Back in the 80s, for example, a baby boomer might have thought that they were a good parent If, let's say, their child was acting up in the mall, cutting up, showing out, screaming, being a little entitled kid, okay, and they spank the child right there in front of everyone, or they scream at the kid or discipline or pop them in the head or whatever. A lot of times, if they didn't do that, if they didn't scream at their kid or take a shoe and whack them, other parents would be standing around and they would think that the parent wasn't a good parent, right? They would say, she's a terrible mom or he's a horrible dad. There's no way I would let my son be acting crazy in the mall or acting crazy in the library and screaming and hollering and doing all that. I would pop him aside his head or I would have whooped his butt right there. So back then, you were considered a good parent if you didn't spare the rod and spoil the child. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, society has evolved now, and we know that striking children is not good. If you listen to what therapists are saying, that is not a good thing because you're teaching them. Remember, kids don't just learn from you screaming and yelling at them and telling them what to do. They learn by mimicking your behavior. And you're teaching them when you hit them that when someone pisses you off, it's okay to just go ahead and hit them. Now, on the flip of that, I'm not a total believer in not hitting a child. There is one thing that would make me say, and I can't beat around the bush here, it's okay sometimes to pop a child, and I'll tell you what it is. I don't think you should ever hit a child under most circumstances. However, if a child hits me, punches me, I had a kid punching me one time, we were in church, and I told him, hey, stop that. And he kept doing it. He went and put some water in his mouth, and he was about to spit it in my face. And I told him, I said, if you spit that water in my face and you hit me one more time, I'm going to wear your butt out. I'm going to whack you so hard, you're not going to believe it. And he sat down, right? And I meant it. If he would have spit that water in my face, I would have whacked him. Or if he were to go and bully a little girl and she's crying and I tell him, hey, stop hitting her, and he hits her, I'm from the camp, I think it's okay to go ahead and show a child, you don't hit people. And if you keep doing it and you keep crossing somebody's boundary, I'm going to hit you so you can see how it feels. Now, obviously, you don't need to take up a belt and do anything over the top. I don't believe in that at all. But I do think some kids need to be taught boundaries, and every kid ain't peaches and cream, and it's not easy to raise kids that understand that. So at the end of the day, there's a level of self-reflection that needs to happen on both sides, parents and children. But I'm going to say this. I believe that there are a lot of entitled parents walking around with children. And, when a child says, hey, your behavior wasn't so great when I was a kid. You used to hit me with belts. You used to scream at me. You neglected me. A lot of times parents go on the defense and they don't want to hear it. And rather than self-reflecting and using active listening and trying to understand where the child is coming from, they get defensive. Why? Because they said this on Oprah's podcast. Nobody wants to feel like an antagonist, like you are a terrible person, like, oh my God, I was a horrible parent. And so you naturally try to defend yourself, which is the worst thing you can do because you're dismissing your adult child's experience. So anyway, that's what it is. At the end of the day, I thought Oprah did a really good job. She kind of included her opinion lightly in the mix, but she stayed as neutral as she could, and she allowed people to speak. And she, brought up a conversation that is important in our society right now. And I thought it was a great episode. I thought it was a great podcast. But what do you think? Do you think she did a good job? Do you agree with me? Do you think we have a lot of entitled parents out here who aren't listening to their children, who just don't have the capacity to self-reflect? Or do you think, children just need to respect their parents no matter what their parents have done to them in the past and stop being so? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments and make sure you subscribe.